So, we will repeat the Sanskrit first for text 47. So, now we'll read the translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. The commentary. One's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad-gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is, by nature, attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahmana, although he may have been born into a Brahmana family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahman is certainly in the mode of goodness. But if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmana. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things that a Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies. And sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs. But a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmin. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes a merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit." One should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie of a merchant, if a merchant says that he is not making a profit. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahmana. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra doesn't matter. If he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Brahmins, who perform different types of sacrifice, sometimes must kill animals, because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the 3rd chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of Jagya, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna. So this is in this verse we are getting to hear a lot about the system of varnas. This is a very complicated topic for us, especially in America or any Western country, to try to grasp. What we know about varnas in general is mostly what we've heard of as the caste system. In India, there is a caste system. In this verse, a lot of what Srila Prabhupada is referring to is related to how the castes and varnas are working in India. Now here in America, we don't really have such a system of caste by birth. We do have, on the other hand, many varieties of occupations. And we can relate to what Srila Prabhupada is saying about the various, things you have to do according to your occupation. Srila Prabhupada talks particularly about Kshatriyas or military people and businessmen. Now, he uses a saying that we come across in India quite often. You're from India, have you? And you've heard, I'm sure. I mean, we've heard this quite a few times from a merchant. Oh no! For you, I'm not making any profit. No. There's no profit involved. Do you hear that? Here everything here is just, no one could get away with that because they know that no one will believe it. But instead they say some other little things, they number one in the world, the world's best, right? How many times you see that kind of advertising? Come and find, this is the world's best, whatever it is. How do they know it's the world's best? Do they have a contest and did people vote? They're just saying it. So many things are said in the course of business in order to get customers. That's the way of business, right? And the way of warfare is people die in warfare. So these aspects of occupation, we're familiar that with whatever work we do, whatever work we end up doing, there's going to be some issues. The next verse, and I don't think we have really the time to read the whole verse and so on, so maybe next week they'll do that. But the next verse relates to this because it says that in every endeavor, it says here, every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. So we're finding in these two verses these two aspects that we always have to struggle with in our lives. When we talk about what should we do with our lives. Now, on the one side, we're looking to do something the best we can. We want to do something wonderful. We want to achieve something great. And so we looked and find, okay, here's something that I can do. Let me do it perfectly. And then sometimes we look and say, well, I'm doing this, but I'm not doing it so well. So let me give it up and do something else. So these challenges that we all face, many of you, I'm sure most everyone here has some work, some occupation right now, working somehow, doing some work. Some of us are retired. My wife and I are retired right now. Maybe Murli, you're also retired. We have a different kind of work.
working.
You're retired too, yes.
Oh my God. I'm retired working.
Yeah. So we don't have careers as such, but we have had, and we've had various occupations. And I'm sure we've all experienced this challenge of being satisfied with our work when we find that things are not going so well, or there's some problems in the work. And we think, let me give it up. Now the whole Gita begins with Arjuna finding himself in that situation. And what Krishna is saying here relates back to Arjuna's initial issue with going ahead with the war that he was faced with in Kurukshetra, and saying, why should I do this? There'll be so much suffering. So many problems will come out of it. What will be gained? And he's even suggesting that maybe I should give up my occupation as a warrior and take up the occupation of a yogi or a mendicant. Maybe let me give up this occupation because this occupation is troublesome. There's so many problems with it, and take up some other occupation. Krishna convinces him throughout the Gita not to do that, and this is one more way in which he's trying to convince Arjuna that this is dangerous. Now I've heard this verse for 50 years. I've read this Gita for a long time, and this particular verse has always troubled me. And I said, well, why not? If I can do something else, even better than what I'm doing now, if I can change my work and do something else which I can do perfectly, then why shouldn't I do that? Why shouldn't I just give up this occupation and take up another? In contemporary Western society, this makes sense. Because in contemporary society, we don't have any sense of occupational duty. So to put this particular verse into context, we have to get out of our current idea of work. To get out of the idea of what work means in our lives. We grow up, for the most part, to consider work to be a way to survive, right? And first of all, to earn some money and get some means to keep ourselves alive. We try to find some work that we enjoy. Now, this is always a big question in most audiences. How many people here who are working are doing something that they truly enjoy doing? Raise your hand if you like your work. Okay, that's why you're here, I guess. How many of you have been in a situation where you were working but you didn't like your work? Okay, same number. How many here are currently working in something that you don't like? Okay, we got a few here. So we end up, either now or in the past, we end up working because we're forced to, by our circumstances and opportunities, to take on work even that we don't like. Now, the Gita here is not actually talking about working according to what you like to do, but it's talking about working according to what your nature is. So let's ask that question in the different context. How many of you feel that you're doing the kind of work which you're really suited to do, that this is your nature, it's your, as they call it, your passion. This is your work follows your your passion and your skills and your abilities. How many of you feel like that? Ah, okay, doing okay. How many feel that they have a nature to do something, and they may enjoy what they're doing right now, but it's not really what they feel they're meant to do? Okay, a few people. All right. Now, I'm sure if we took this questionnaire, we took this survey out in the streets and so on, we'd find a lot of different, and we'd find probably most people, at least this is what I've heard, most people are not able to do the work that they really feel that they are most suited to do. There are certain reasons for that. First of all, a lot of the things that we feel we're by nature, this is what we really can do, don't pay any money. There's no money in it. And so, we end up taking on a job, our day jobs, so to speak, right? Some of you probably have a day job, and then you have your real thing that you do. It's, what you really live to do, that's not paying you any money, so you take on some sort of work in order to pay the bills, and you just wait until that's over so you can get back to your passion. This is the problems that we face in contemporary society. The Vedic culture that Krishna offers, he offers us a social and economic system, which is just kind of hinted on here. In this chapter, we get some idea of the Vedic socio-economic cultural system that Krishna offers. Back in the 4th chapter, he introduces this by saying, Chatur Varnyam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. He introduces that I have made a system for people to work. The premise of the Gita is that Krishna is the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. I am the source of everything, Krishna says. So he's the source of material and spiritual realities. And for this material reality that we're absorbed in, he says, I've created Chatur Varna. I've created these 4 Varnas, these 4 categories of work. And I've created them according to 2 things, guna and karma. I created them according to particular qualities in different individuals and according to different arrangements of work. Now, these arrangements of work come back into what's described here as occupational duty. So the Varna system, the system that Krishna creates, says that there's a few core elements. The first element is there's going to be a division of labor. We can't all do the same thing. And the analogy is given as like a body. In a body, there's a head, there are arms, there are legs, there's a stomach. Different parts of the body do different things. So there has to be a division. Now, the second part of this formula is that for each of these kinds of work, there are certain qualities which are required for that work to succeed, and there are certain duties that are and obligations, certain things that go with that. And this we call dharma. So when we speak of this social system, the full nomenclature is Varna Ashrama Dharma. So there's Varnas, meaning various categories of work. There's Ashramas, meaning various stages of life. but it's all guided by Dharma. So it's on the basis of this concept of Dharma that Krishna is saying, it is. I didn't turn off my phone. Okay, let me just turn that off and turn this off so it doesn't ring again. Okay. Dharma. So there are different qualities by which one works. There are different kinds of work. And it's all related to Dharma. And it's on the basis of this concept of Dharma that Krishna is saying what he's saying here. Why is it wrong? Why should it be dangerous, in fact, for someone to do somebody else's work, even if he can do it well? The answer lies in the concept of Dharma. Once you accept some form of work in the varnashrama system, you're not just accepting the mechanics of that work. You're not just accepting the details, okay, this is what I do, this is how I do it, but you're accepting a specific Dharma that goes with it. And the Dharma is different according to that work. The duties, and this is what Prabhupada is pointing out, that the duties of a businessman, for example, are different than the duties of a teacher, an educator, or a priest. The duties of a soldier are going to be different from those of a common person, a worker. So if you take the work and do the work, even expertly, but you don't have the associated Dharma that goes with it, then the results of that work can pull apart the fabric of this social system. Because the overriding quality of the system that Krishna has created is that it is an integrated system of work. And the integration is around the pleasure of Krishna. That's what Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here. That the ultimate basis for all of our work should be the satisfaction of Krishna. That's the missing element in contemporary society. We're working, we're creating so many different things, we have so many social and economic arrangements, but they're all designed for some sort of material progress in the name of advancement and development that ignores the pleasure of Krishna. And as such, we tend to degrade, and that's what Prabhupada uses that term, degrading, into a system of exploitation. So, understanding Varna and Ashram, we just had a class last night on this from one presenter who's talking about Srila Prabhupada and his talking about this subject and how it's been difficult for devotees in general to grapple with the concept of Varna and Ashrama fully. It's a little easier for us to understand the idea of ashrams. You start off as a brahmachari, you become a married person, then you retire, etc. It's a little easier, not so complicated. when it comes to identifying as Brahmins or Kshatriyas or Vaishyas or Shudras or whatever, it's tough. Now, I think in this audience we have quite a few devotees who have taken up Krishna consciousness in their lives. How many of you can raise your hand and say honestly, I understand the whole business of Varnashram? Anyone? If you are, then I'll stop here. You can come up and you can take over. I've been studying this topic for, how long, 20 odd years at least. I began my study of this topic in 1990, serious study of it in 1995, 96, when we were preparing to celebrate Srila Prabhupada's 100th birth anniversary. So we organized a conference about this topic of Varnashram. And we had 4 days of talking about it. And there's been books, and there's been it. I mean, any of you who are closer into the sphere of the Krishna movement, I think, understand what I'm talking about when you know that this topic is difficult. It's difficult because of many things. First of all, the world we live in is not the world that Krishna spoke about in the Gita. How many here have read the Mahabharata? Okay. Now, things happen in the Mahabharata that are so fantastic. I mean, you can imagine such things. If somebody told you that, well, yesterday the sun god came down and we had a little chat and he left me with a baby, but it's just incredible. It's all incredible. But it was a real world. It's a world that existed thousands of years ago. And that world no longer exists. We don't perceive that world anymore. We don't perceive demigods walking around. When was the last time you saw a shower of flowers? Ever seen a shower of flowers? We saw a shower of flowers on the day after Rath Yatra, right? In Radha Govinda Mandir, there was flowers being showered. But they didn't come from the clouds. We were doing it. But these things were happening. So in that time, the Varnas and the Ashram and the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas and all these systems and the dharmas and the rules and how it all worked. I mean, even this verse talks about animal sacrifices. Where does that fit? So it's not easy to understand it if we simply try to look at it from where it was in the past, in the time that is being spoken of. So we have to go deeply and try to pull out some of the principles. So when I read this verse, and today when I was, I had no choice. This was the verse for today. I might have said, maybe we can take some topic which is a little lighter. And we will, actually. I wanted to switch gears, so give my wife a chance to also speak a little bit. We'll talk a little more just about Srila Prabhupada and so on. But to finish off this particular topic, what I've tried to do today is to help you pick out some of the essential points. So the first essential point that we can learn from this is that when we look towards our work, we should try to do 2 things. First of all, we should look within ourselves and really try to understand what our nature is. I think many of you have already raised your hand that you are, you either doing work, you're working according to what you really feel is your passion and your nature, or at least you're trying. You're moving in that direction. You can see it. So that's one. But that's not enough. That's not enough, because the second verse will also reiterate that we're never going to find our perfect work. Even if we are able to really understand our nature, our svabhava is the word used here, and we get into some work and occupation that is closely related to that, it'll still be covered with fault. This is the next verse. Every endeavor is covered with some fault. There'll be problems. So the second thing is that when we're faced with the problems, first let's try to find a way to get into that work which is suited. And we should be careful not to take on work which we're not so suited for, especially when that work demands something higher than we have. And Prabhupada is pointing to this, that very often we find in society people are able to take on work which they're not qualified for. And we should be careful that we don't aspire or try to take on some work that we really don't have the qualification to do. And not just the qualification to do it mechanically, because Prabhupada, this is the verse here, is that it appears to be perfectly done, but because you don't have the right quality for it, there'll be something there that will cause it to produce a bad reaction. So the second thing there, therefore, is, okay, we follow, we try to understand our nature, we try to get into some specific work, we're not dissuaded by the problems and so on, to the extent that we then say, okay, let me give this up and take something else on, and start just shooting all over the place. But two more points. One is that we should seek out and try to understand what is the specific dharma associated with my work. What are the things that I really shouldn't be doing in this work, and what are the things? It's okay for me to do. What are the obligations? What are the moral and ethical principles on which I should engage in this work? Because it's not going to be the same for every kind of work. And finally, the most important point is that how does this work please Krishna? Now, when we talk about working to please Krishna, to please God, then we can think of it in two different ways. First of all, we can think, well, I'm doing this work and I'm earning some money. Many people, they're in a situation where all they can do to make their works please Krishna is to take some of the money that they earn from their work and give it to Krishna. But that's good. But even better is when your work itself is pleasing to God. The work that you do pleases Him. Now, how do you do that if you're working in the world? So there are a number of ways. Krishna, first of all, tells you, think of Him as you're working. Help you remember Him as you're working. Even relating your work. And in this respect, this is where the Dharma comes in. To see, okay, how is my work? How is it helping to bring about a more dharmic world in general? How does it promote the modes of goodness, for example, over the modes of passion and ignorance? And you'll find as you apply this thought process to your work, that you may find that, well, if I do this a little differently in whatever you're doing, I don't, I try to invoke the modes of goodness where I'm more by nature inclined towards the lower passion and ignorance type of activity. That work will become enhanced, and Krishna will be more pleased directly by your work. So, ideally, if we're businessmen, for example, we find a way to do business in which we produce a product which is useful for devotional life, or useful at least it doesn't counter. We don't produce things that simply make the world a worse place to live in. We produce something good, something nice, something artistic or beautiful, not just more plastic or whatever. So we do that. We also see how can we integrate our work, our business, or whatever into the service to other human beings. So we bring in some service elements, social service elements into our work. And maybe we're teachers. So when we teach, we try to invoke the qualities of a teacher that Krishna describes. Or perhaps we're an administrator, so we invoke those qualities, the qualities of an administrator that Krishna describes, particularly the quality of being a protector. Generally speaking, we find people in administration who do not have that mood of protecting others. They're, managing, manipulating, but they don't have that feeling that I must protect everyone that is working with me. Or perhaps I'm just a worker. And so I look to see, can I make my work really satisfying to Krishna? That Krishna says, yes, you respected my planet. You respected my energy. You respected the idea of beauty, and you made something that's good, that's lasting, that's pleasing. So that's the last point, that whatever work we're doing, let's see how we can make it serve Krishna and please Krishna. So I wanted to move on because we have a little bit longer, right? We have until, we have a lot of time. 7:30. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Hare Krishna. So my wife is Atitaguna. She's here, and we thought we could switch over a little bit and tell maybe some stories, because she was invited to also speak, and so we wanted to tell a few things that relate to this. And I wanted to start with one that I thought you might like to tell. And wait, how do we get you? Why don't you sit over here? Because this relates to the whole idea of work. And the, trying to do something to please Krishna with your work. And I was thinking about the ironing episode.
Oh, okay.
That was kind of interesting. You could have given up. But when do we? And then we'll do this, and then we'll take some questions and answers. Okay?
This is challenge.
Hare Krishna. It was quite incredible. I actually joined Krishna consciousness in New Zealand, and I kept on hearing that the devotees were saying, all your spiritual desires will be fulfilled. So I thought, I'm going to ask her a really hard one. And the really hard one was, I'm going to ask that Srila Prabhupada personally initiate me. Now, it was 1975, and most devotees by that time got initiated by letters. But I wanted to personally see him and get initiated. So, as it happened, many of the ladies went to Australia. So I went to Australia, and that was still on my mind. I want to see Srila Prabhupada, and I want Srila Prabhupada to initiate me. So then in the middle of April, everyone was like, Prabhupada's coming, but you never were absolutely sure that he would come. So in the end, he did come. Actually, one person, my husband was saying, like businessmen say, for you I make no profit. So one Prabhu came to me and said, you don't really need to see Srila Prabhupada. Right from the beginning, you don't need that. It's better to do service for him. So I'd like you to stay back and not go to the airport, and you can do service, like make the sandalwood paste, and then we'll allow you to personally put it on his forehead. So I was a very new devotee then, so I thought, that's possible, but not probable. So I said, he kept on saying, Mataji, service and separation is very, very high, at a very high level. So why don't you not go to the airport and see him, and stay back and serve in separation? So I said to him, if serving in separation is so very high, why don't you stay back and make the sandalwood paste and put it on Srila Prabhupada's forehead? So we both went into the car and went to the airport. And then that was kind of an unusual thing. There was 4 doors that Srila Prabhupada could have come out of from customs. And he'd been in out of the first 3 doors in former years. So we're all waiting around this door, and Srila Prabhupada. And in those days, the devotees completely took over the airport. Everyone in the airport knew the devotees were there. They were chanting. There was madanga drums, everything. There was ecstasy. There was jumping out of your body and like that. So then we were standing at this door, Jaya Prabhupada, and of course the spiritual master can do what he likes, so he didn't come out of that door, he came out of another door. And it was absolutely incredible to see him, because it was like he was walking about 9 to 10 inches above the ground. He absolutely floated like that. So anyway, because the first thing that happened is the next day it was initiations. So Srila Prabhupada called everybody up by name And then when he got to me, I went up, and he said, "Okay, Bhaktin Louise, your name is Anita." And I was surprised because that is like a common name anyway. And he said, "No, it isn't. Your name is not Anita. Anita means without a path. And we devotees, we Vaishnavas, we have a path. So I'm going to call you Atitaguna." And then I realized right there and then my spiritual desire had been fulfilled. Not only was he personally initiating me, but he personally gave me my name. So anyway, there was many services to do, and one of the I know we shouldn't talk about envy because we're devotees and we shouldn't envy, but one of the enviable things was washing Srila Prabhupada's cloth. So, as it so happened, the lady who was supposed to wash the cloth wasn't feeling well that day, and so she said to me, "Oh, can you wash Srila Prabhupada's cloth?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yes, of course." So I thought, I'll make it so wonderful. I'll make it the best washing and ironing ever. I was really into doing that service. So I thought, I'll make it really wonderful. I'll get some pure sandalwood oil and put it all over his clothes, and it'll smell so wonderful. So I got the sandalwood oil because I was the pujari assistant then, so I could get my hands on pure sandalwood oil if I needed it. So I put it on Srila Prabhupada's dhoti and kurta, and got a bucket together of hot soapy water. So I washed everything, and rinsed it, and hung it up to dry, waited for it to dry, and then I started ironing it. And when I ironed it, then I saw something I didn't want to see, and that was big blobs of oil. So I thought, well, I wanted the best, but it didn't come out that way. So I know what I'll do. I'll go to the householders. In those days, 90% were brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, and about 10% were householders. So I went to the householders to beg some money to get a potion to be able to spray on the oily kurta and dhoti to get rid of that, and then I could wash it again. So I went to the householder house and got $2 or something, ran to the supermarket, came back, sprayed it all down, put it in hot soapy water, washed it the best I could, washed it, rinsed it, and then there wasn't enough time to dry it. So I just ironed it dry. So I ironed it, expecting to see no blobs of oil, but what did I see? Blobs of oil everywhere. And I thought, what could I do? I just have to iron it, give it to his servant, and take it to Prabhupada. But I just felt so bad. I felt like I did the best I could, but it really wasn't good enough. So I ironed it, feeling very remorseful and regretful that I'd made such an enormous mistake. So anyway, I ironed it and I gave it to Hare Prabhu, who was his servant. And I said, "Hare Prabhu, I put some sandalwood oil on, and it seems to have stuck to the clothes, and there's nothing I can do. All I can do is give them to Srila Prabhupada. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that. Srila Prabhupada, he has mustard oil massages all the time, and there's oil over everything. Oh, don't worry about it." So then I was thinking that I went through so much remorse and pain and everything like that. But because I did the best I could with what I had for my spiritual master, it just turned out well.
This is interesting, because this is the next verse where it says, every endeavor is covered by some fault. Right? Just as every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore one should not give up his work, born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. So I was thinking about, as you were talking about it, I was thinking that it's better to engage in one's occupation, this is today's verse, even though one may perform it imperfectly. So here, this was, you were given an occupation, you were given something to do, you were given a job to do, even though it seemed to be imperfect. But because you were doing it, it was your you did it. It was your service to do. It was given to you. You were doing it in your full mode and mood of offering to Srila Prabhupada. And that was the perfection of it, that it was your service. Whereas, you could have sent it all to the dry cleaner. That would be very different. So, let's have, we'll do some more, but I thought let's first take a bit to answer any questions that might have come up from the previous. Early's got a question, so.
I've had this question.
Or a comment.
No, question for a long time.
Uh-oh.
So Prabhupada implies and then states directly in the purport that when someone's acting according to their particular occupational duty, there's no sin incurred. And he gives the example of a Kshatriya killing an enemy. He says there's no sin. In the 10th canto, in the story of Muchukunda, after Krishna appears to Muchukunda, and Muchukunda offers prayers, and Krishna speaks to him, and he then says, now you should go and perform austerities to make up for the sins that you had to commit in the course of your occupational duty, like killing enemies, like killing animals and killing enemies. Muchukunda was a Kshatriya. He killed enemies. Krishna's saying that was sinful. You have to make up for it. Here, Prabhupada's saying that it's not sinful. So I'm confused.
The Mahabharata, and we were in our Radha Govinda Mandir Bhagavatam class, we were studying the first canto, the passing away of Bhishma Dev. Now, prior to this, many of you raised your hand when I said you read the Mahabharata, but anyway, so I can't spend the time getting into the whole Mahabharata, but anyhow, in this first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we find Yudhisthira, Maharaj Yudhisthira. The war is finished, but Maharaj Yudhisthira is feeling the way Arjuna felt before the war began. He's feeling that way when now the war is finished and they've won, but so much killing has taken place. And Maharaj Yudhisthira, he's thinking, so much sin has I've incurred. And Krishna is trying to convince him, many are trying to convince him that, no, you did your duty. You did what you had to do. And it was for a higher cause. No one can actually convince him until Bhishma does so. But in that context, we do hear about, and we do find later on that Maharaj Yudhisthira is recommended to perform a yajna.
he's recommended to perform a sacrifice, to cleanse whatever sin may have occurred. And the next verse also hints at this, because it says, whatever we do, there is going to be some fault. Whether the execution, what we did, okay, that itself may have been, perfectly righteous. But because of the nature of where there's fire, there's smoke. Or where there's smoke, there's fire. Anyway, but in this case, it's where there's fire, there's smoke. Wherever there's anything, where we live, there's going to be some sin, something that happens that gives pain or injustice to another living being, even unintentionally. And we have to cleanse. We have to become cleansed of those things. So that's my understanding, is that in the course of every occupation, so it's not that whatever we do in the material world, as long as we're in this material arrangement, there's practically no escape. There's no escape from the laws of karma. There's no escape from the defects of this world. There will be consequences. And as long as we're in this world, as long as we're trying to enjoy independently of Krishna, we're going to have to keep cycling through the various bodies and karmic effects that our actions have. So therefore, at the end, Krishna says, Sarva Dharmam Pratyasha. That even though you try to follow all this Dharma, even you try to do all of this, it still is going to be imperfect. So ultimately, there's only really one solution. You have to surrender to Krishna. You have to surrender to Him. And say, I am yours. And then He says, now I'll take care of it all. Masucha. Any other questions about this topic of karma, varna, and ashrama, and duty, and occupation? And yes.
Pancharatna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My question is, in the six purposes of ISKCON, the first purpose is that we're trying to propagate Krishna consciousness to humans.
To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life, in order to correct the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world.
Right. So the last part, it says unity and peace. So if we work for Krishna within the material energy, even if we do it according to our varna, still it's imperfect.
Yes.
So how do we have peace and unity?
Well, Prabhupada's formula is to correct the imbalance of values. That he's saying that the cause of disunity, the cause of antagonism, of violence, and etc. in the world, is a lack of, or an imbalance in the values of life. And that the solution to correct that imbalance is to understand spiritual knowledge and to practice spiritual techniques, namely Sankirtan, which gets further. The prospect of a world with unity and peace is very attractive, but like you said, how is it possible? How is it, especially when we live in an age characterized by the opposite? Still, we work for this. Yesterday I was listening to a podcast I had to drive a long distance, so I listened to a TED Talk podcast, a TED Radio Hour. Some of you may have had the need to spend some time driving and try to make use of it. So this was a talk on how to change the world. So I thought that's something that I can relate to. I want to, this is what we're after, changing the world. And they had 3 or 4 different people. They take from different talks and they assemble it. And one of the common themes was, these were all activists. These were all people who were, first one was in the civil rights movement, and then another one was also in some labor movement, different things. All working for social justice, all working for unity, for peace. And one of the common things was that many of them were asked, well, hey, you faced a lot of problems. And each one of them, some of them were like really horrific. Really horrific. The first speaker was 17 years old. She was part of the Selma March. And anyway, she ends up being confronted, just going down to the store to get some drinks for their group, some soda pop, and being confronted by a man with a shotgun, pointed right at her, and a young white man actually behind with her, who pulls her aside and takes the bullet. And she's 17. By the way, the man got acquitted. And the question was, doesn't it make you want to give up? And again, all the different people were asked, they all face different circumstances, arrests and this and that. Doesn't it want to make you give up? And they all said, no, it made me want to work harder. The prospect of unity and peace in the world, yes, it seems like a dream, but even if we achieve 50%, even if we achieve 10%, if we achieve 1%, that is that many more souls who can have that unity and that peace in themselves. So that, I believe, is Prabhupada's idea of setting out our mission. Let's work. In fact, I'll tell a story. We'll get to Mayapur again, because so both of us live in Mayapur. And so I'll tell you how I came to Mayapur, and then you'll tell about your first visit to Mayapur. So when I came from New York. I'd been a devotee in the first Brooklyn temple on Henry Street, and then moved to Manhattan, 55th Street. And I went to India on pilgrimage, and I got involved in all kinds of services there. And so there was a request that I stay back. I stay in Mayapur and help with the project there. So our GBC, or the person who the authority for ISKCON New York at the time, when he arrived, because I'd come earlier, he said, "Well, I'm new," because he'd just been appointed for ISKCON New York, and he said, "We need to talk to Srila Prabhupada." So we went to Srila Prabhupada, and when we came in, Srila Prabhupada I don't know if it's a little vague in my mind, but either there was a newspaper somewhere nearby, or for some, it was clear that he had heard some news of the day that was in India. Today in America, anytime you open the newspaper, you can expect something depressing. So he was also had read something that was just the opposite of the unity and peace in the world. And his first statement to us was, we cannot expect the whole world to become Krishna conscious. But at least there should be one ideal place. So, one way to look at this mission is that when we say to bring about real unity and peace in the world, doesn't necessarily mean everywhere in the world. But at least there should be some places. At least there should be some places where we can go and find this unity, like Gitanagari, for example. You're wearing the are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. So like that's a place like that, where we can go and see, yes, there are at least some places, or even our homes, our communities. So that's, he did say that the next thing I'll just repeat, and then you can tell about your visit to Mayapur, because it relates to this. But this relates to you, because the next thing that happened was Madhavisa, who was our GDC, he said, okay, yes, Srila Prabhupada. He began, he was opening it up. So he said, Srila Prabhupada, we understand that this Mayapur is your most important project. And Prabhupada turns, no, New York is my most important project. So all of you who are connected to this place and everything that we're trying to do in this movement, remember that, New York. So, and you went to Mayapur. Before we were married, she went. And then she came to New York.
Yeah. So, Haribol, I first went to Mayapur in the Gorpanim festival, and that's usually around March, and that was 1977. So, it was very, very primitive, extremely primitive. The ladies were put on a roof in some tents, and then the first thing that happened is a storm came and blew down the tents. Anyway, it's very, very primitive. But the next morning, I went to chant my japa on the road. At that time, about the Ganges River, the Ganga, was about half a mile from the temple. Now it's very, very close. It kept on moving up each year. Now it's very, very close. I was chanting my japa then, and the sun was rising, the birds were chirping. I was under a banyan tree, and I thought, Krishna, somehow or other, I've got to come and live here in Mayapur. This is the spiritual world. So later on that day, I went down to the Ganga, and I went with another Mataji, another lady, and we were just sitting there and chanting some more, and all of a sudden some tulsi beads came down the river. So the lady I was with, very quick thinking, she went and she grabbed them. Actually, it was a tulsi mala garland, manjari garland. So she picked that. So that's Krishna. Yeah. So then, about 2 minutes later, there was another mala, and it was small conch shells So I reached out and picked that up, and I thought, this is a sign, Krishna and Balaram, this is a sign. So later on that day, the ladies could, 2 ladies could go and see Srila Prabhupada for 2 minutes. So one other lady and I were in line, and the ladies were going and having darshan with Srila Prabhupada and coming out after 2 minutes. And before I went to Mayapur, I said to one of the Matajis who'd been before, I'd really like to take a present to Srila Prabhupada. Now, Australia is a land full of cows and wonderful milk and ghee and everything, so every year the Australian devotees would take 2 kilos of ghee to give to Srila Prabhupada. So I had that, and I'd ask one lady, oh, there's something, I want to give another present to Prabhupada, something personal. And she said, oh, give a tin of full cream powdered milk. Now, I didn't realize till I came to America that that's a very rare thing. Everything is skim milk here. But in Australia, everywhere, you get full cream powdered milk. So I thought, you can get that anywhere. Why should I do that? But I'll follow her instructions. So I went to the store and got it. And then, so I was holding that with a little red bow I put on to give to Srila Prabhupada. And different things were going through my mind. This isn't a very nice gift. Maybe he'll say things like, full cream powdered milk, that's a long way from real milk. Or I was just speculating in my mind what was going to happen. So anyway, it was our turn, and we went into Srila Prabhupada's darshan room, and of course it was full of sannyasis with sticks. So it was a bit of a daunting situation. So we went in and gave the ghee, and then this thing was just going through my mind about what Srila Prabhupada's reaction was going to be. So anyway, I said, Srila Prabhupada, this is for you, and I gave him the full cream powdered milk. And then I couldn't believe it. His eyes completely widened, and he said, please tell my cook to make all my milk sweets out of this. And so I was thinking that if you humbly gave something to Srila Prabhupada, he would like it and he would accept it. And then, instead of being 2 minutes with Srila Prabhupada, he talked to us for 30 minutes about cows and cow protection. And I couldn't believe my good luck to be able to be in the presence of Prabhupada like that. And he was talking about cows and how we should protect them, and the Goshala in Mayapur.
That connects again with the topic we've been talking about is doing your duty. How do you please Krishna with your work? And the element of cows, I've always felt is one of those things that if we see how to connect our work with the protection of cows, then we know that at least that aspect would certainly please Krishna. And that's not always easy. I mean, but there are ways to find ways that we can connect with the protection of cows in any work that we're doing. But I think one of Prabhupada's solutions for spiritual knowledge and techniques to correct the imbalance of values in life and we'll find that in that particular mission of ISKCON and all the missions of ISKCON, the concept of education, of teaching, is threaded throughout. And we were just discussing, yesterday, day before, Srila Prabhupada was, his ideas about Varnashram. And how many of you here have heard anything about Prabhupada's idea about Varnashram College? Who's heard about Varnashram College? Murli has heard about it. No one else?
Some people may not know what Varnashram is.
Not even, yes. Well, we talked all about Varnashram this class, so I think hopefully you know what Varnashram is by now. But maybe you don't. I mean, have I made the idea of Varnashram clear a little bit? A little bit. Okay. One of the things I made a point of saying in this class is that it's a difficult topic, and I invited anyone who knew more about it to come here and give the class instead of me, because it is deep. But anyhow, if you go back and you study Srila Prabhupada's words and talks about, what he talks about Varnashram, you'll find that around 1974, mainly in Vrindavan, he introduced the idea of a Varnashrama college. And in fact, he said that we should open a Varnashram college in every one of our centers in ISKCON. At every ISKCON center, we should open a Varnashram college. And I've thought often about this. And what I came to, my conclusion was that this topic of how do we take these principles, how do we take these ideas, how do we take for example, the role of cows in society, how do we do that? I mean, the reaction of modern society to the problem of cows in general, those who are aware of the problem of cows, what is their solution?
Stop taking milk.
Yeah, become vegans, right? Isn't it? How many vegans are here? No. You're vegan? Yeah. I mean that's once you start to know about what goes on with the cows, when you know, I mean, I hope you all do know that the cows who give us milk, the milk that we drink and we offer to Krishna, is coming from cows, most of whom, at best, if we're selective and we go for the organic and the grass-fed and the et cetera, then at best, they live reasonably comfortable lives before they're slaughtered.
Right.
What was it? A few weeks ago, we were at Prospect Park, and there was a lady from a farm in upstate New York, and she was selling cheese and milk from her cows. And we asked her.
Generations.
So, yeah, for 3 generations they've been running a little dairy. It's a small little, dairy. And she said, "Well, what do you do? Do you eat them? What do you just what do you think about eating? Or what do you think about?" Says, "Yeah, we eat." And she spoke and she said it as if it was like, "Yes, of course," and we do it very respectfully. We honor them. I couldn't bring myself, I mean, Atita was really kind of upset. I did want to find out more, but I didn't want to get into an argument, so we left it at that. But that's the fact. And so this is a huge problem. So part of a big core element of making the Varnas work, in other words, the occupational duties. We've been talking about what does Varnashram mean? It means that you work according to your nature, but what's most important Because that everyone's trying to do that. They may succeed or not succeed, but that's a common thing. Yeah, find your passion. Work according to do what you love. That's common. But what's not common, what people don't understand, is two things. One is, what are those duties that go with that work? And secondly, is who else needs to be incorporated in, and the cows are part of that system. Everyone in Varnashram has a duty towards cows. The Vaishyas specifically protect the cows, but everyone, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Sudras, they all have a role to play to protect cows. So somehow in our work, whatever it is, let's see if we can find a way to protect cows. Now, I'll offer you something that you could start with. Because, except for, do you actually stay at Gitanagari?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have direct opportunity to serve and protect cows. But most of us, anyone else here keep cows in their backyard? No? No more cow. Yeah, cows?
We have a lot of deer.
You have deer. Yes, you have a lot of deer.
They come and go.
Yes,
You don't have them.
yes, they live there. And I'm sure you are challenged by the idea of protecting them at all points. But anyway, cows, most of us don't have a chance to serve cows. So I've been practicing this. In Mayapur, we do have a chance to serve cows. Although we have the same problem, by the way, in Mayapur as you have here. The milk that we get in Mayapur, where we live most of the year in Mayapur, India. And the milk that we get comes from farmers who also don't protect their cows. When the cows get old, they sell them. When they have bull calves that they can't take care of, they sell them. The people who buy them rear them for some time, until they get a little older, they fetch some more money, and they sell them. And 90 to 95% of the cows and bulls and so on that are sold in the markets in our area, there's 2 or 3 markets, and every week there's about 500-600 cows and bulls that are sold. They're smuggled across the border to Bangladesh, where there's a great market, unfortunately, for cow meat, and they're slaughtered. And the leather is exported back to Calcutta, and that becomes the shoes that people wear. So the response, one response is, be vegan. Don't support this. Unfortunately, that doesn't solve the cows' problems. The cows, that's not going to help the cows. There's enough people going to buy the milk, etc. But what is a solution is to put more money into the service of those cows. And one way to do that is to try to get a hinksa milk, or milk that comes from protected cows. And if you can't do that, then what we're advocating was coined by Jayadvaita Maharaj, called it a hinksa balancing. And you consider that, okay, I'm not a vegan, I want to continue to support cows, I want to have a relationship with cows, but I don't want to support their slaughter. I don't want to do that. Now, I may not be able to prevent the slaughter of the specific cows that are giving the specific milk that I'm buying in this particular store, but I can calculate that if this milk were coming from protected cows, then those farmers would need from me, they'd need from me this amount of money to give to those cows. Or let's just put it, consider the farmers to be the middlemen. And the cows, we're dealing with these cows. If I were to get the, milk from you, Ms. Lalita, go, whatever. If I were to get Gita Nagari had some amazing Kalindi, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Kalindi. Kalindi was one of the first cows there, right? Because I remember Kalindi kept giving milk till she was 20 years old or something like that, without any calves. She just loved the devotees so much, and the devotees loved her so much that she just kept giving milk. So Ms. Kalindi, I want to support you. I want to make sure that your life is, you have enough to eat for the rest of your life. You're going to be taken care of. So in exchange for the milk that you're giving me, I'm going to give you enough money to live on. Now, we can't do that for Ms. Kalindi directly, perhaps. We're not getting the milk from her. But we can take that same amount of money. Say for example, when we go to the store and we buy milk at $3 a gallon, $4 a gallon? No. Organic milk is $6 or something, I think.
Or more.
Or more. $9?
I don't know.
Gita Nagari is now 15. What is it?
Yeah, 14.
14?
7.5.
Which is still low. And we can say, okay, I am saving, so to speak, $5 or $6 a gallon from the subsidies of the life of those cows. So I'm going to take that money. I'm not going to give it to the farmer because what he'll do with it. But I'm going to take that money. I'm going to give it to Gita Nagari. I'm going to give it to New Vrindavan. I'm going to give it to cows or people that are ready to serve cows. And in that way, gradually, more people that do this, then we find, okay, more devotees or even just regular farmers. That farmer we spoke to in Prospect Park, if she was guaranteed enough money to take care of it, maybe we could convince her, don't sell those cows, don't eat them. It's not so nice to eat them. Yeah, you did it, humanely or whatever, but
she loved them so much.
she was telling us how much she loved them. But she's rationalized. The way I saw it is she couldn't do anything else. She couldn't afford to keep those cows till they died. So she rationalized killing them by, making it into some sort of, sacred thing. I don't know what she did. But, so I suggest that. Think about it. Think about taking a look at what you spend on milk and setting aside that money and donating it for the care of cows. So, and that's one way to enhance your duties in the world, to make them closer and closer to the ideals of Krishna's social system. So, now we are out of time. But there may be, is there anyone, you wanted to say something more?
I was going to say that I get milk sometimes from a fellow who has this very small herd. He takes care of them. They all have names. He loves them. So I asked him what happens when they stop giving milk. He gave me the exact same answer. You kill them respectfully. So I told him, would you like to be killed respectfully? But they have this mentality. I don't want to offend the Native Americans, but I think it may come from their tradition, because the Native Americans had this idea when they were going to kill an animal, they had to do it, I'm sorry, I have to kill you, and like when they would kill buffalo or something, they had this idea of killing with respect. But it's, like you said, it's just some rationalization.
It's a rationalization.
But I also agree with that point. There are people who, if they did have the money, they might consider not killing them.
Yes, they would. So, giving you a chance. All right. Hare Krishna, thank you for giving us a little time. You want to say anything more? No? I think we're out of time. Hare Krishna. We're supposed to do kirtan now?
That would be wonderful.
Is there anyone who plays the mridanga here?
Cooking.
Oh, Vin, yes. He's a good mridanga.